My fiancé told me drunk, "I'm only with you until my ex gets out of prison. He's the love of my life, you're just a pathetic substitute keeping his bed warm." When I didn't react, she laughed, and said, "You're so pathetic you won't even fight for me." I didn't say a word. That was 5 weeks ago. Last night, she was crying at my door at 3 a.m., all bruised up, begging me to take her back. I'm staring at the bruises on her face through my doorbell camera at 3:17 a.m., watching the woman who destroyed my life 5 weeks ago now sobbing on my doorstep. Her mascara is running in black streams down her cheeks, and there's a cut on her lip that looks fresh. She's wearing the same dress she wore to our engagement party 8 months ago, the one where she told everyone how lucky she was to have found her person. "Please, Marcus," she's whispering to the camera, her voice cracking. "I know I messed up. I know what I said was horrible, but I need you. I'm so sorry. He hurt me, Marcus. Please just let me explain. But I'm not opening that door. Not tonight. Not ever." Because 5 weeks ago, Sarah Chen, the woman I'd planned to marry in 3 months, the woman I'd bought a house with, the woman who wore my grandmother's engagement ring, told me the truth about our entire 2-year relationship while she was drunk off her mind at my best friend's birthday party. But let me start from the beginning. 2 years and 4 months ago, I met Sarah at a coffee shop near the university where I worked as an IT administrator. I just finished a brutal day dealing with a server crash, and I was grabbing my usual, large black coffee, extra shot, when this stunning woman in front of me started laughing at something on her phone. "Sorry," she said, turning around with this infectious smile. "My friend just sent me the most ridiculous meme about computer programmers, and I couldn't help myself." She showed me her phone. It was one of those "it's not a bug, it's a feature" memes, and I actually laughed, which was rare for me back then. I'd been pretty isolated since my divorce 2 years earlier. "You work in tech?" I asked. "Medical billing software," she said, rolling her eyes. "Not exactly glamorous, but it pays the bills. I'm Sarah, by the way. Marcus. And trust me, I understand unglamorous tech work." We ended up talking for 2 hours. She was funny, smart, and had this way of making even mundane stories entertaining. She told me about her chaotic family, 5 siblings, all scattered across different states, and how she'd moved to Portland to figure herself out after a bad breakup. "What happened with the ex?" I asked, which looking back, was probably too personal for a first conversation. Her face darkened for just a second. "He made some really bad choices. Let's just say he's not available to date right now." I assumed she meant he was married or something. I was 32, she was 28, and we'd both been around enough to have relationship baggage. It didn't seem like a red flag. Our first official date was at this little Italian place called Nonna's on Division Street. Sarah ordered the gnocchi and spent 10 minutes telling me this elaborate story about how her grandmother used to make them from scratch every Sunday, complete with voices for different family members. I was completely charmed. "You're really easy to talk to," she said over dessert. We'd split the tiramisu. "I haven't felt this comfortable with someone in, well, a really long time." "Same here," I admitted. I was starting to think I was broken after my divorce. "What happened there?" "We grew apart. Wanted different things. She wanted to travel the world, and I wanted stability. No drama, really. Just incompatible life goals." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Well, I love stability. Drama is exhausting. If only I'd known." The next 6 months were honestly the happiest I'd been in years. Sarah had this way of making ordinary moments feel special. She'd leave little notes in my lunch, silly drawings or inside jokes about whatever show we'd watched the night before. She introduced me to this podcast called True Crime Garage and got me completely hooked. We'd spend Sunday mornings in bed listening to episodes and debating whether the hosts got the details right. She was affectionate without being clingy, independent without being distant. She had her own apartment in the Alberta district, but she started staying over more and more often. She kept a toothbrush at my place, then some clothes, then half her skincare routine took over my bathroom counter. "I think you're stuck with me now," she said one morning, watching me navigate around her face wash and serums. "I've basically moved in without asking." "I don't mind," I said, and I meant it. For the first time since my divorce, I could picture a future with someone. The only weird thing, and it seemed minor at the time, was how she never talked about her past relationships in detail. She'd mention her ex occasionally, usually when explaining why she didn't like certain movies or restaurants. "Oh, we used to go there all the time," but she'd always change the subject quickly. "Are you in contact with any of your exes?" I asked her once, about 8 months in. "No," she said immediately. That guy was toxic. I learned my lesson about staying connected to people who are bad for you. She seemed genuinely disgusted by the idea, so I dropped it. Around our 1-year anniversary, we started talking about moving in together officially. Sarah's lease was up in 3 months, and my rental house had plenty of space. We spent a weekend looking at apartments just to see what was available, but we both kept coming back to the idea of her moving into my place. Are you sure? She asked. It's a big step. I'm sure, I said. I love having you around. The house feels empty when you're not there. That wasn't just romantic talk, it was true. Sarah had this energy that filled up spaces. She'd rearrange furniture to make rooms flow better, she'd put on music while doing dishes, she'd actually use the front porch I'd been ignoring for 3 years. She made my house feel like a home. Moving in together was seamless. We had the occasional disagreement, she liked the thermostat higher than I did, and she had way more kitchen gadgets than any human needed, but nothing serious. She paid her share of everything without me having to ask, she respected my need for quiet time to decompress after work, and she never made me feel bad about my boring routines. You're like a golden retriever, she told me one evening, watching me organize my tools in the garage for the 3rd time that month. Just happy to have your space organized and your people nearby. Is that a compliment? It's the highest compliment. Golden retrievers are the best dogs. We got engaged on a Tuesday. Not because it was a special date, but because we'd been talking about marriage for months, and I'd finally found the perfect ring, a vintage emerald cut that had belonged to my grandmother. I proposed in our kitchen while Sarah was making coffee, because that's where we'd had our best conversations and it felt right. Are you serious right now? She asked, staring at the ring box. Dead serious. Marry me, Sarah. She said yes while crying and laughing at the same time, and we called both our families that night. Her mom cried, my dad made jokes about me finally settling down again, and her youngest sister immediately started planning the bachelorette party. For 6 months, everything was perfect. We set a date, October 15th, a small ceremony at the Botanical Gardens. Sarah threw herself into wedding planning with the same enthusiasm she brought to everything else. She made spreadsheets for vendors, she researched photographers for weeks, she even learned to make our own invitations because it's more personal that way. I want everything to be perfect, she told me one night, surrounded by invitation samples and color swatches. This is the only wedding I'm ever having. I believed her completely. The first sign something was wrong came in early September, about 6 weeks before our wedding. Sarah got a call while we were watching a movie, and she stepped outside to take it. She was out there for nearly an hour. Everything okay? I asked when she came back in. Yeah, just family drama. My cousin's going through a divorce and needed to vent. But she seemed shaken up in a way that didn't match the explanation. She kept checking her phone for the rest of the evening, and when I tried to continue the movie, she said she had a headache and went to bed early. Over the next few weeks, these mysterious calls became more frequent. Always when I wasn't around, while I was at work, or in the shower, or running errands. And Sarah's mood started shifting in ways I couldn't predict. One day she'd be her normal, cheerful self, excitedly showing me photos of centerpiece ideas for the reception. The next day she'd be distant and snappy, getting irritated when I asked basic questions about vendor confirmations or timeline details. Are you getting cold feet about the wedding? I asked her one evening in late September. Because if you need to postpone or... No, she said, almost aggressively. Why would you even ask that? You just seem stressed lately. And you've been getting a lot of mysterious phone calls. She stared at me for a long moment, like she was deciding something. They're not mysterious. I told you, it's family stuff. My family's complicated, Marcus. Not everyone has nice, stable parents like you do. That stung because it wasn't true, my parents had their own issues, but I let it go. Wedding planning was stressful for everyone, right? But then came the night that should have been my wake-up call. It was October 2nd, 13 days before our wedding. We were at Jake's birthday party. Jake was my best friend from college and the guy who'd introduced me to half my friend group. The party was at his house, maybe 30 people, mostly couples from our social circle. Sarah had been drinking more than usual, which wasn't like her. She normally had 2 drinks max and switched to water. But that night she kept going back to the bar Jake had set up in his kitchen, and by 10 p.m. she was definitely drunk. I need some air, she announced, pulling me out to Jake's back deck. You feeling okay? I asked. I'm fine. Better than fine. You know what? I'm grateful. Grateful for what? She leaned against the deck railing and looked at me with this strange smile. For you. For this. She gestured vaguely between us. For having someone to take care of me. Something about the way she said it felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on why. I love taking care of you. That's what partners do. Partners, she repeated, like she was testing the word. Yeah. Partners. A few minutes later, Jake came outside looking for us. Sarah, your phone's been buzzing nonstop in the kitchen. Sounds urgent. Sarah's face went completely white. She rushed inside, and I followed a few steps behind. She was staring at her phone screen, and whatever she was reading made her hands start shaking. I need to go, she said, not looking at me. Right now. What's wrong? What happened? Nothing. I have to handle something. She left the party without another word of explanation, taking an Uber even though we'd driven together. I had to get a ride home from Jake, who spent the entire drive asking if Sarah and I were having problems. I don't know, I told him honestly. I really don't know. When I got home around midnight, Sarah's car was in the driveway, but she was already asleep, or pretending to be. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. Sorry about last night, she said, making coffee like it was any other day. I got some bad news about my grandmother's health and I panicked. I should have explained better. But when I asked for details about her grandmother, her story kept changing. First it was a heart attack, then a stroke, then a fall. And when I suggested we visit her or send flowers, Sarah got defensive. She's not really the flowers type. And she lives in a really small town. It would be weird for you to show up. I'd been with Sarah for over a year and a half, and I'd never met any of her family. They all lived too far away or were dealing with their own stuff. At the time, I thought maybe her family was just difficult, some families are. But looking back, I realize I'd never even seen photos of most of them. The weird phone calls intensified. Sarah would get texts that made her face go pale, then she'd disappear for hours with vague explanations about errands or meeting friends I'd never heard of. 2 weeks before the wedding, I woke up at 2 a.m. and she wasn't in bed. I found her in the living room, sitting in the dark with her phone pressed to her ear. I can't do this anymore, she was whispering. It's too hard. When she saw me, she hung up immediately. Who was that? Wrong number. Someone kept calling. But I'd heard enough to know that wasn't true. Someone had answered, and she'd been having an actual conversation. Sarah, what's going on? Really? You've been acting strange for weeks. She looked at me for a long moment, and I thought she might finally tell me the truth. Instead, she burst into tears. I'm just scared, she sobbed. What if we're making a mistake? What if we're not compatible long term? What if I'm not good enough for you? I held her while she cried, telling her all the reassuring things you tell someone having pre-wedding anxiety. But even as I comforted her, I couldn't shake the feeling that her tears weren't really about cold feet. Jake's birthday party was October 20th, 5 days after our wedding date. We'd had to postpone the ceremony because Sarah's grandmother had taken a turn for the worse, and Sarah said she couldn't get married while dealing with a family crisis. I was disappointed but understanding. These things happen, and we could always reschedule for the spring. The party was supposed to be a casual get-together to celebrate Jake turning 35, but it turned into something of a commiseration party for me. Everyone knew about the postponed wedding, and I spent the first hour fielding sympathetic questions and assuring people that everything was fine between Sarah and me. Sarah had been acting more normal in the days since we'd postponed. Less mysterious phone calls, more engagement with wedding planning for the new date. I thought maybe whatever family crisis she'd been dealing with was resolving itself. But that night, she started drinking early and didn't stop. By 9 p.m., she was loud and giggly in a way that made me uncomfortable. By 10 p.m., she was having slurred conversations with people about topics that made no sense. By 11 p.m., I was ready to take her home. Sarah, maybe we should call it a night, I suggested, finding her in Jake's kitchen mixing what looked like her 7th or 8th drink. Don't be such a dad, she snapped. I'm having fun for the first time in weeks. I'm not trying to control you. I just think. You always think, Marcus. That's your problem. You think everything to death instead of just living. That hurt, because she'd never criticized me like that before. Sarah drunk was usually Sarah but more affectionate and silly, not Sarah but mean. I backed off and spent the next hour talking to other people, keeping an eye on her from across the room. She seemed to be arguing with someone on the phone again, standing in Jake's hallway with her finger pressed to her ear to block out the party noise. At 11:47 p.m., I remember the exact time because I checked my phone when it happened. Sarah found me on Jake's couch and sat down next to me with the kind of deliberate movement drunk people use when they're trying to appear sober. Marcus, she said, and something about her tone made my stomach drop. I need to tell you something. Okay. She looked me directly in the eyes, and what she said next will be burned into my memory forever. I'm only with you until my ex gets out of prison. He's the love of my life, you're just a pathetic substitute keeping his bed warm. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. The noise of the party seemed to fade into background static, and I just stared at her, trying to process what she'd just said. What did you just say? You heard me. She was still looking right at me, and there was something almost curious in her expression, like she was conducting an experiment. Javier gets out in 3 months, and then I'm done playing house with you. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I felt like my entire understanding of reality had just shifted underneath me. Say something, she said after a few seconds of silence. But I couldn't. What do you say to something like that? How do you respond when the person you're supposed to marry in the spring tells you that your entire relationship has been a lie? When I didn't respond, Sarah laughed. Actually laughed. You're so pathetic you won't even fight for me, she said, shaking her head. I literally just told you I'm using you, and you're just sitting there like a kicked puppy. Javier would have thrown someone through a wall by now. That's when something clicked into place for me. Not anger, not yet. But a kind of cold clarity that cut through the shock. I stood up without saying a word and walked to the bathroom. I locked the door, pulled out my phone, and did something I'd never done before. I started recording a voice memo to myself. October 20th, 11:52 p.m., I whispered into my phone. Sarah just told me, and I quote, I'm only with you until my ex gets out of prison. He's the love of my life, you're just a pathetic substitute keeping his bed warm. When I didn't react, she said, you are so pathetic you won't even fight for me. She mentioned someone named Javier getting out in 3 months. I don't know why I did that. Maybe some part of my brain was already planning for what came next. When I came out of the bathroom, Sarah was exactly where I'd left her, now talking to Jake's girlfriend Emma like nothing had happened. Ready to go home? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Sure, Sarah said, like we just had a normal conversation about the weather. We drove home in complete silence. Sarah passed out in the passenger seat before we were even out of Jake's neighborhood. I kept glancing over at her, this person I'd thought I knew completely, wondering how long she'd been acting. When we got home, I helped her to bed. She mumbled something that sounded like love you as I pulled the covers over her, and I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. I spent that night in the guest room, staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment of our relationship, looking for signs I'd missed. The mysterious phone calls. The vague family stories. The way she'd never introduced me to anyone from her past. The postponed wedding. By morning, I'd made a decision. Sarah woke up the next day with no memory of what she'd said. She was hungover and apologetic, making me breakfast and asking if she'd embarrassed herself at the party. You had a lot to drink, I said carefully. Do you remember our conversation on the couch? She squinted at me, clearly trying to recall. We talked on the couch? About what? About your ex. My ex? She looked genuinely confused. Why would I bring him up? Either she was the world's best actress, or alcohol had completely wiped that memory from her brain. I decided to test it. You mentioned someone named Javier. I watched her face carefully. For just a split second, maybe half a second, her expression changed. Not confusion, but something closer to panic. Then it was gone. I don't know any Javier, she said, but she turned away from me to focus on flipping pancakes. You must have misheard me. That's when I knew she was lying. And that's when I decided to find out the truth. I started small. I knew Sarah's last relationship had ended badly, and she'd mentioned her ex making bad choices. If someone was in prison, there would be records. I began with Oregon's inmate search database. Sarah had lived in Portland for 3 years, so if she'd been involved with someone local, they might be in the state system. I searched Javier with different last names, common ones like Rodriguez, Martinez, Garcia. Nothing matched Sarah's timeline. Then I remembered she'd moved to Portland from somewhere else. She'd been vague about where exactly, usually just saying down south when anyone asked. I tried California's inmate database. Again, nothing obvious. But then I remembered something she'd said months earlier about missing real Mexican food. She'd mentioned a specific restaurant called El Corazon that had the best carnitas she'd ever had. I googled it. El Corazon had 3 locations, Los Angeles, Phoenix, and Las Vegas. I tried Nevada's inmate search. Javier Ruiz. Age 31. Incarcerated at High Desert State Prison. Conviction date, March 15, 2023. Charges, aggravated assault, domestic battery, violation of restraining order. Projected release date, January 20, 2025. 3 months from now. Exactly what Sarah had said. I stared at the screen for 10 minutes, reading and rereading the information. Domestic battery. Restraining order. Sarah had been in a relationship with someone who'd been convicted of hitting her. And she was planning to go back to him. I dug deeper. Court records in Clark County, Nevada showed a pattern that made my stomach turn. 3 domestic violence calls to Sarah's address in Las Vegas between 2022 and 2023. A restraining order filed in January 2023 after Javier had apparently broken into her apartment and threatened to kill her if she ever left him. The final incident in March 2023 where neighbors called police after hearing screaming and sounds of a physical altercation. According to the police report, officers found Sarah with a black eye and bruised ribs. Javier was arrested at the scene. But here's what really got me, the victim impact statement Sarah had filed with the court. Javier Ruiz manipulated and controlled me for 2 years, she'd written. He isolated me from my friends and family, monitored my communications, and became increasingly violent when I tried to assert any independence. The night of his arrest, he told me he would hunt me down if I ever tried to leave Nevada or start a relationship with someone else. I am filing this statement to ensure the court understands the ongoing danger he represents to my safety. She'd moved to Portland 6 weeks after he was sentenced. I printed everything. Police reports, court filings, the restraining order, even news articles about the case. Apparently Javier had a history of domestic violence with previous girlfriends too. Then I did something that felt awful but necessary. I started monitoring Sarah's communications. I didn't hack her phone or anything dramatic. But I started paying attention to when she got texts, when she stepped outside for calls, when she was on her laptop late at night. And I bought a small recording device, the kind people use for lectures, and started keeping it in my pocket when we had conversations. I felt like a horrible person doing it, but I needed to understand what was really happening. It didn't take long to confirm my worst fears. On November 3rd, I came home early from work with a migraine and heard Sarah on the phone in our bedroom. The door was closed, but I could hear her voice through it. I know, baby. I miss you too. It's only a few more months. I pressed my ear to the door, my heart hammering. Marcus? He's fine. He doesn't suspect anything. He's too trusting for his own good. There was a pause while whoever she was talking to responded. Of course I don't love him, Sarah said, and her voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. He's nice and stable and he pays half my bills. That's it. You know you're the only one I've ever really loved. Another pause. I bought a burner phone like you said. This is the last time I'm calling from my regular number. From now on, we only talk on the burner, and I keep it hidden. I backed away from the door as quietly as possible and left the house. I sat in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes, trying to process what I'd just heard. When I came back inside, Sarah was in the kitchen starting dinner like nothing had happened. Hey baby, she said, giving me a kiss on the cheek. How was work? Fine, I managed. Just fine. That night, I started planning. I could have confronted Sarah immediately, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the lawyer's instinct I developed during my divorce, or maybe it was just self-preservation, but I realized I needed more than just overheard phone conversations. Sarah was planning to leave me for someone who'd been convicted of domestic violence. Someone who'd threatened to hunt her down. Someone who, according to the court records, had put her in the hospital. And she was doing it with my money, in my house, while wearing my grandmother's ring. I started documenting everything. I found the burner phone 3 days later. Sarah thought she was being clever, hiding it in a shoebox in our guest room closet, but I'd been systematically searching the house while she was at work. It was a basic flip phone, and she'd been texting someone saved as Jay almost daily. I photographed the entire message thread. Jay, 84 days baby. Can't wait to hold you again. Sarah, I dream about it every night. This fake life is killing me. Jay, just remember what we talked about. Don't let him get suspicious. Sarah, he's too stupid to get suspicious. Still hasn't figured out why I postponed the wedding. Jay, good. Keep playing the part. We're going to need his money for my lawyer fees when I get out. Sarah, how much do you think we can get? Jay, he owns that house, right? And he's got savings? Sarah, about 80K in savings, plus the house is worth maybe 400K. Jay, perfect. Soon as I'm out, we'll figure out how to get our share. I photographed every message, every date stamp, every character. There were hundreds of them, going back months. But the messages that really made me sick were the personal ones. Sarah, I hate pretending to care about his boring job stories. Jay, soon you won't have to pretend anything. Sarah, he thinks we're going to have kids together. Can you imagine? Jay, you'd never have kids with a weak man like that. Sarah, never. Our kids are going to be warriors, not whatever he would make. The worst part was reading how they talked about our intimate moments, Sarah describing our private conversations and even our physical relationship in crude detail, laughing about my pathetic romantic gestures and how desperate I was for her approval. I made copies of everything and stored them in 3 different places: my office computer, a cloud drive Sarah didn't know about, and a physical folder I kept locked in my desk at work. Then I hired a private investigator. I know that sounds dramatic, but I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. A PI named Rebecca Torres came highly recommended from a lawyer friend, and she specialized in domestic and financial fraud cases. What exactly are you hoping to prove? Rebecca asked during our first meeting. I showed her everything: the court records, the text messages, the timeline of Sarah's behavior changes. I need to know if this is just emotional infidelity, or if there's something criminal happening here, I said. And I need to protect myself legally and financially. Rebecca reviewed everything and whistled low. Your fiancé is running a long con, Marcus. This isn't just about her having feelings for someone else. Look at these messages about your assets, about getting their share. This is fraud. What kind of fraud? She's entered into an engagement with you under false pretenses, with the explicit intention of financial gain. Depending on what she actually does with your money or property, we could be looking at theft, identity fraud, maybe even racketeering if this is part of a pattern. That was a sobering thought. What do you recommend? Keep documenting everything. Don't confront her yet, let her keep digging her own hole. And start protecting your assets immediately. If she has access to any of your accounts, change that access. If you have joint accounts, we need to document the balances and her activity. I followed Rebecca's advice. I started checking our joint checking account daily, and sure enough, Sarah had been making small withdrawals, $200 here, $150 there, that she'd never mentioned. When I asked about them, she had explanations that sounded reasonable: work lunch with a client, gift for her sister's birthday, car repair. But Rebecca had warned me that small, consistent withdrawals were a common pattern in financial fraud cases. They're conditioning you to not question money disappearing, she explained. By the time they make the big withdrawal, you're used to not tracking every penny. I also discovered that Sarah had been researching divorce law in Oregon. Her browser history, which she thought she'd deleted, included searches for how is property divided in Oregon divorce. Can you get alimony from broken engagement, and what happens to engagement ring if wedding cancelled? She was planning our breakup before we'd even had it. But the discovery that really shook me came when Rebecca ran a full background check on Sarah. It turned out Sarah Chen wasn't even her real name. Her legal name was Sarah Elizabeth Kowalski. She'd been born in Michigan, not California like she'd told me. And this wasn't her first time doing this. Between 2019 and 2022, she'd been engaged twice. Once to a man named David Park in Seattle, once to someone named Richard Chen in Las Vegas, which explained where she'd gotten the name Chen from. Both engagements had ended abruptly, right around the time she'd started having family emergencies. Both men had filed police reports claiming she'd stolen money from them before disappearing. David Park had lost $12,000 from their joint account. Richard Chen had lost $8,000 plus a car she'd convinced him to put in both their names. Your fiancé is a professional, Rebecca told me during our second meeting. This is what she does. She finds stable, financially secure men, builds relationships with them, gains access to their resources, then disappears when her imprisoned boyfriend is ready to get out. How many times has she done this? Based on what I can find? At least 3 times, including you. There might be more. That night, I sat in my office at home, staring at photos from our engagement party. Sarah looked so happy in them, so genuinely excited. Her acting skills were incredible. But I still wasn't ready to confront her. Rebecca had advised me to wait until we had everything documented, and I wanted to understand the full scope of what Sarah was planning. The answer came sooner than I expected. On December 15th, I came home from work to find Sarah packing a suitcase. Taking a trip? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. My grandmother passed away, she said without looking up from folding clothes. I need to go home for the funeral. Another family emergency. Another grandmother story. I'd lost count of how many health crises Sarah's various relatives had experienced over the past few months. I'm so sorry, I said, Because that's what you say when someone's grandmother dies, even when you know they're lying. When's the funeral? Tomorrow. In Sacramento. I'll probably be gone for a week, maybe 2. Family's a mess right now. Sacramento. That was new. Usually her family emergencies were in vague locations she never named specifically. Do you want me to come with you? For support? No, she said quickly. It's going to be really emotional and chaotic. Plus you'd have to take time off work. She left that evening, giving me a long hug and telling me she loved me. I'll call you when I land, she promised. She didn't call when she landed. She didn't call the next day either. On December 17th, I got a text, funeral was delayed. Family drama. We'll be here longer than expected. That's when I called Rebecca. She's not in Sacramento, Rebecca told me after making some calls. I have a contact who tracked her phone. She's in Las Vegas. Vegas? Why would she? Then it hit me. Javier's getting out early. Looks like it. His release date got moved up. He was released yesterday morning. My blood went cold. So Sarah lied about her grandmother dying so she could go be with him the day he got out of prison. That's exactly what happened. And Marcus? You need to protect yourself right now. Check your accounts, change your passwords, and make sure she doesn't have access to anything important. I hung up and immediately logged into our joint checking account. $43,000 was missing. Sarah had made a massive withdrawal the morning she left for her grandmother's funeral. She'd cleaned out almost everything we'd saved for the wedding, the honeymoon, and the down payment on a bigger house. I called the bank immediately, but they told me what I already knew. It was a joint account, and she had every right to withdraw the money. But it's theft, I said to the customer service representative. Sir, legally speaking, any account holder can withdraw any amount from a joint account. If you believe fraud has occurred, you'll need to file a police report. So I did. I drove straight to the Portland Police Bureau and filed a report for theft and fraud. I brought Rebecca with me, along with binders of evidence, the text messages, the court records from Nevada, the background check showing Sarah's real name and pattern of behavior. Officer Jennifer Walsh took my statement and reviewed everything I'd brought. This is definitely fraud, she agreed. But it's going to be complicated to prosecute because she did technically have legal access to that joint account. What about the identity fraud? She's been using a fake name. That's more promising, Officer Walsh said. And the pattern of behavior with previous victims strengthens the case significantly. We'll need to contact the other victims and coordinate with Nevada authorities. What happens now? We investigate. It might take some time, but based on what you've shown me, there are definitely criminal charges we can pursue. I left the police station feeling simultaneously vindicated and devastated. I'd been right about Sarah, but being right didn't make the betrayal hurt any less. That night, Sarah called me for the first time since she'd left. Hey baby, she said, and her voice sounded different. Happier. More relaxed than I'd heard her in months. How are you holding up without me? I'm managing, I said carefully. How's the family stuff going? Oh, you know. Lots of crying, lots of drama. Funerals are never easy. I'm sure. When do you think you'll be home? There was a pause. A long pause. Actually, that's kind of why I'm calling. There's been a complication. Here it comes, I thought. My aunt, she's elderly and she doesn't have anyone else. She's asked me to stay and help her get things settled. My grandmother left behind a lot of legal stuff that needs sorting out. How long are we talking about? Maybe a few more weeks? I know it's not ideal with the holidays coming up, but family has to come first, right? Right, I said. Family first. You're being so understanding about this, Marcus. I love that about you. After we hung up, I sat in our living room, my living room, looking at the Christmas tree we'd decorated together just 2 weeks earlier. Half the ornaments were ones Sarah had picked out, including our first Christmas engaged ornament she'd been so excited about. I took it off the tree and threw it away. On December 22nd, I got another text from Sarah, Aunt's situation more complicated than expected. Going to be here through New Year's. So sorry baby. Miss you so much. That same day, Rebecca called with an update. Your Sarah's been busy in Vegas, she said. She and Javier rented an apartment together on December 16th, the day after she left Portland. She's been posting photos on a social media account you don't know about, showing off expensive dinners and shopping trips. Shopping trips paid for with my money. Exactly. And Marcus? There's something else. She's been calling herself Mrs. Ruiz on some of these posts. They might have gotten married. That hit me like a physical blow. While I'd been sitting at home worried about her fake family emergency, she'd been in Vegas marrying the violent criminal she was actually in love with. Using money she'd stolen from me to pay for it. There's more, Rebecca continued. I talked to David Park and Richard Chen, her previous victims. They're both willing to testify about their experiences with her. And get this, she used the exact same story with both of them. Family emergencies, sick relatives, needing to travel for funerals. The same script. Word for word, according to Richard. She even used the same names for her fake relatives. I spent Christmas alone. Sarah sent me a text on Christmas morning. Merry Christmas, baby. Wish I could be with you. Aunt's doing a bit better but still needs me. Hope you understand. I understood perfectly. On December 30th, I got a call from Officer Walsh. We've got enough evidence to issue a warrant, she told me. We're charging her with theft in the first degree, identity fraud, and criminal conspiracy. The FBI is also interested because this crosses state lines and involves multiple victims. When will you arrest her? We're coordinating with Las Vegas PD. Should happen within the next few days. Sarah was arrested on January 3, 2025, at the apartment she shared with Javier. According to the arrest report Rebecca obtained for me, she was found with multiple fake IDs, nearly $30,000 in cash, and a detailed notebook containing information about targets including their financial situations, social media habits, and relationship histories. There were 12 men listed in that notebook. 12 men she'd researched as potential marks for this exact same scam. Javier was arrested too, on charges of conspiracy and receiving stolen goods. Apparently, he'd used some of my money to buy a motorcycle. But the story wasn't over yet. Sarah made bail on January 8, ironically, using money from one of her earlier victims who apparently still had feelings for her. She immediately started calling me. I didn't answer the first dozen calls, but she was persistent. She left voicemails that started out contrite and got progressively more desperate. Marcus, please call me back. I can explain everything. It's not what it looks like. Baby, I made some mistakes, but I love you. We can work this out. I never meant for any of this to happen. Javier manipulated me into it. I was scared of him. And finally, if you don't drop the charges, I'm going to tell everyone you abused me. I'll destroy your reputation. I saved every voicemail and forwarded them to Officer Walsh and my lawyer. On January 12, the local news picked up the story. Local woman arrested in multi-state romance scam ran on 3 different Portland news stations. They used Sarah's booking photo and mentioned that she'd stolen from multiple victims. The story went viral on social media within hours. I started getting calls from reporters, from other potential victims, and from people who'd known Sarah and wanted to share their own stories about her suspicious behavior. One call particularly stood out. It was from a woman named Lisa who'd worked with Sarah at her medical billing job. I knew something was off about her, Lisa told me. She was always getting these urgent phone calls that made her upset, and she'd take long lunches to deal with family stuff. But the weird thing was, she'd slip up sometimes and forget which story she'd told which person. What do you mean? Like, she told me her sister lived in Chicago and was getting divorced. But she told another coworker her sister lived in Denver and had just gotten married. Small stuff like that, but it happened all the time. Lisa also told me something that made my blood run cold. She asked me a lot of questions about my boyfriend. Like, really specific questions about his job, his income, where he lived. At the time I thought she was just being friendly, but looking back, I put Lisa in touch with the FBI agents who'd taken over the case. The investigation expanded rapidly. It turned out Sarah and Javier had been running this scam for years, targeting different cities whenever he got out of prison on various charges. Sarah would move to a new place, establish a fake identity, find victims, and extract as much money as possible before Javier's release date. The FBI estimated they'd stolen over $200,000 from at least 8 different men across 5 states. But while the criminal case was moving forward, I still had to deal with the personal aftermath. Sarah had taken more than money from me. She'd taken my trust, my confidence in my own judgment, my ability to believe that people could be genuinely good. I started seeing a therapist because I couldn't sleep, couldn't concentrate at work, and couldn't imagine ever trusting anyone in a romantic relationship again. This wasn't your fault, Dr. Martinez told me during one of our sessions. Professional con artists are experts at manipulation. They study psychology, they practice their techniques, and they specifically target people who are trusting and emotionally open. But I should have seen the signs. Maybe. But the signs you're talking about, mysterious phone calls, vague family stories, those could describe a lot of people dealing with legitimate family problems. You interpreted her behavior in the most charitable way possible because that's who you are as a person. That's not a flaw. Dr. Martinez was right, but it didn't make me feel less stupid. The hardest part was telling my family and friends what had really happened. I'd spent months defending Sarah, making excuses for her behavior, telling people that everything was fine between us. Jake was furious when I told him the truth. I knew something was wrong that night at my birthday party, he said. The way she was talking to you, it felt cruel. I should have said something. What would you have said? That my fiancé seemed mean when she was drunk? I don't know. Something. But my dad had the reaction that surprised me most. I'm proud of you, he told me during a phone call. Proud of me for what? Getting scammed by a criminal? Proud of you for handling it the right way. You could have confronted her immediately and probably never gotten your money back or seen her face justice. Instead, you were smart about it. You built a case, you protected yourself, and you made sure she couldn't do this to anyone else. He was right about that. Because I'd been methodical about gathering evidence, the prosecutor had everything she needed to build a strong case against Sarah and Javier. On February 14, Valentine's Day, which felt like cosmic irony, Sarah's lawyer called mine with a plea deal offer. She would plead guilty to theft and fraud charges, serve 18 months in prison, pay full restitution to all victims, and provide information about other potential victims and accomplices. In exchange, the more serious conspiracy charges would be dropped. What do you think? My lawyer asked. I thought about it for a week. Part of me wanted her to face the maximum penalties for what she'd done. But another part of me just wanted it to be over. Will the restitution actually get me my money back? Eventually, yes. She'll be required to pay you back over time, and if she doesn't, she goes back to prison. And the information about other victims? Could help a lot of people get justice. I told him to accept the deal. Sarah pled guilty on March 1st. I attended the hearing, sitting in the back of the courtroom while she stood before the judge and admitted to the crimes. She looked different. Thinner, older, like the stress of being caught had aged her months and just weeks. When the judge asked if she had anything to say before sentencing, she turned around and looked directly at me. I'm sorry, she said, and for a moment she sounded like the Sarah I'd thought I knew. I'm sorry to everyone I hurt. Then she was led away in handcuffs. Javier got a harsher sentence, 3 years, because of his criminal history and the domestic violence charges. But the story still wasn't over. 5 weeks ago, on a Tuesday night, I was having dinner with my coworkers when my phone started buzzing with notifications. Text messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Dude, isn't this your ex-fiancé? Marcus, you need to see this. Call me ASAP. The messages all included links to local news articles with headlines like romance scam victim hospitalized after domestic violence incident and convicted fraudster attacked by ex-boyfriend. Sarah had been released from prison 3 days earlier after serving 13 months. She'd gotten time off for good behavior and for providing information that led to other arrests. According to the news reports, she'd gone directly to Javier's halfway house when she got out. He'd been released 2 weeks earlier on parole. The reunion didn't go as planned. Javier had apparently been angry about Sarah's plea deal, claiming she'd betrayed him by cooperating with prosecutors. When she showed up at his halfway house, they'd gotten into an argument that escalated into violence. A neighbor called police after hearing screaming and sounds of someone being thrown against walls. They found Sarah unconscious in the parking lot with a concussion, broken ribs, and extensive bruising. Javier was arrested for parole violation and assault. He was back in prison within hours of attacking her. Sarah spent 4 days in the hospital and was released with nowhere to go. The halfway house wouldn't take her because of the incident. Her family had apparently cut her off completely, and she had no money. She'd been making restitution payments from her prison job, so any savings she might have had were gone. I felt nothing. No satisfaction that she'd been hurt, no pity for her situation. Just a kind of detached interest in how the story was ending. I didn't expect her to show up at my door. But last night, at 3:17 a.m., my doorbell camera started recording the woman who'd destroyed my life, now broken and desperate and asking for help. Marcus, please, she was saying to the camera. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I have nowhere else to go. I'm not the same person I was. Prison changed me. I see how wrong I was, how much I hurt you. She was crying, but I'd seen Sarah cry before when she wanted something. I'll do anything to make it right. I'll pay you back every penny, I'll work for you, I'll be your servant if that's what it takes. Just please don't leave me out here. Javier said he's going to find me when he gets out again. I'm scared, Marcus. I'm so scared. I watched her through the camera for almost an hour. She sat on my front steps, sometimes crying, sometimes just staring at the door like she could will me to open it. At 4:23 a.m., a police car pulled up. Someone, probably a neighbor, had called about a suspicious person on my property. I watched through the camera as the officers approached Sarah and asked for ID. I watched her explain who she was and why she was there. I watched one of the officers walk up to my door. I didn't answer. After a few minutes, they helped Sarah to her feet and drove her to a women's shelter downtown. She hasn't been back since, but she's been calling. 6 calls yesterday, 4 more this morning. I'm not answering, and I've blocked her number, but she keeps calling from different phones. It's been 5 weeks since Sarah showed up at my door, and I'm finally ready to tell this story because I think I've learned something important about justice, forgiveness, and moving on. Sarah stole $43,000 from me, but I got most of it back through restitution payments and insurance. She stole 2 years of my life, but those weren't entirely wasted. I learned things about myself and about relationships that I might never have learned otherwise. She made me question my ability to judge people, but therapy helped me understand that being trusting isn't the same as being stupid. The hardest thing she stole was my faith in love. For months after her arrest, I couldn't imagine ever being vulnerable with someone again. But time and therapy have helped me realize that what Sarah and I had wasn't love, at least not on her side. It was a performance, a business transaction disguised as a relationship. Real love doesn't lie. Real love doesn't steal. Real love doesn't keep one foot out the door while planning its exit strategy. I'm dating again now. Slowly, carefully, but I'm trying. Her name is Amanda, she's a librarian, and she thinks my story about Sarah is both fascinating and horrible. She's patient with my trust issues and doesn't mind that I ask probably too many questions about her past. She understands that I need transparency in a way that most people don't. Trust is earned, she told me on our 4th date. You're not wrong to want to see evidence before you give it. Amanda has introduced me to her family, her coworkers, her college roommate. She's shown me photos from her childhood, taken me to her hometown, let me meet her grandmother. She understands that these things matter to me now in a way they didn't before Sarah. As for Sarah herself, I've heard through mutual acquaintances that she's been staying at various shelters and halfway houses around Portland. Someone told me she's been trying to contact some of her other victims, but most of them have moved on with their lives and aren't interested in rehashing the past. She sent me a letter 2 weeks ago through her parole officer. It was 5 pages long, handwritten, and filled with apologies and explanations. She claimed she'd been manipulated by Javier from the beginning, that she'd never intended to hurt anyone, that she was a different person now. I read it once and threw it away. Because here's what I've realized, it doesn't matter if Sarah has genuinely changed or if she's running another long con. It doesn't matter if her remorse is real or if she's just sorry she got caught. It doesn't even matter that she's suffering now after years of making other people suffer. What matters is that I don't owe her forgiveness. I don't owe her a second chance. I don't owe her anything. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about the person who hurt you. It's about freeing yourself from carrying their burden. And I've forgiven Sarah, not because she deserves it, but because I deserve peace. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean trust. It doesn't mean opening my door at 3 a.m. when someone who destroyed my life shows up asking for help. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. The night Sarah appeared on my doorstep, broken and desperate, I could have let her in. I could have offered her a place to stay, helped her get back on her feet, tried to rebuild something from the wreckage of our relationship. But I didn't. And I'm proud of that choice. Because some bridges are meant to be burned. Some doors are meant to stay closed. And some people, no matter how much they claim to have changed, don't deserve a place in your life. Sarah chose Javier over me when she thought he was her meal ticket. She chose crime over honesty when she thought she could get away with it. She chose to see me as a mark instead of a person when she thought it would benefit her. Those were her choices, and she has to live with the consequences. My choice is to build a life without her in it. A life based on honesty, mutual respect, and genuine love. A life where I'm valued for who I am, not what I can provide. A life where I'm nobody's substitute. 3 days ago, Amanda and I adopted a golden retriever puppy. We named him Murphy, and he's currently destroying my favorite pair of shoes while somehow still being the best thing that's happened to me in years. See? Amanda said, watching Murphy try to carry a tennis ball that's too big for his mouth. Golden retrievers really are the best dogs. She's right. And I think I'm finally ready to be someone's favorite person instead of someone's backup plan. Last night, Murphy woke me up barking at something outside. I checked the doorbell camera, half expecting to see Sarah again. But it was just a raccoon going through the neighbor's garbage. I went back to bed, and for the first time in over 2 years, I slept peacefully through the night. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. And that's exactly what I'm doing.